Thrill Seekers! Good morning. Yesterday, I put up on my blog a new piece. It's hardcorezen.info is where my blog is, by the way. And it is an interview I did in 2005 on a show called The Beer O'Clock, a radio show. And I always liked it, and I transcribed it, or had it transcribed. I can't remember if I did it myself, or I think that other people did it, and then I fixed it up. Anyway, the transcription was for the purpose of using it in my book Sit Down and Shut Up, but then I didn't use it in the book Sit Down and Shut Up, and it's been sitting on my computer all along, so now I finally put it up on the blog, so go look at it. And on Friday, I put up a new piece on my, what is that thing called? Podcast. My podcast, the Hardcore Zen podcast. And it is about Buddhas alone together with Buddhas, Yuibutsu, Yobutsu. And I'm going to try to have one up every week on that subject for a while until I run out of stuff to say about it. So go listen to that too. And speaking of Yuibutsu, Yobutsu, that's what I wanted to talk about today. So yesterday I recorded the part 2 of the commentary on Yuibutsu, Yobutsu that I'll put up on Friday. And I just wanted to get into the very first line. And in case you haven't watched, Yuibutsu, Yobutsu is Buddhas alone together with Buddhas. It's a essay by Dogen, that appears in Book 4 of Shobogenzo, translated by Nishijima Cross. It appears in Book 2 of Treasury of the True Dharma Eye, as translated by Tanahashi et al. It appears in Book 3 of Shobogenzo, translated by Kosen Nishiyama and other people. And it also appears in the Hubert Neerman translation of Shobogenzo, which I have a printed copy, but it's not here, so I'm not going to show it to you. But you can find that one online. So, here's the deal. The very first line of this piece really interests me, because, how about I just read you what it says in Japanese? It says, Buppo wa hito ni shirubeki ni arazu. Now, what does that mean if you don't speak Japanese? The Nishijima Cross translation gives it as, the Buddha Dharma cannot be known by people. The Tanahashi translation, which in this case, given, for the most part, I really like the Nishijima Cross translation better than any other, but in terms of this particular line, I like the Tanahashi version better. The Buddha Dharma cannot be known by a person. And the Hubert Neerman translation, which I don't have on paper, well, I do have it on paper, but it's not here, but I do have it online, goes, the Buddha Dharma is something that ordinary people cannot recognize. That, I think, is a mistranslation, and I'm going to tell you why. And let's see. This version just kind of skirts over the line and changes it and kind of mashes together several lines from the beginning of the essay. So their first line is, the Buddhist Dharma cannot be understood through rational and intellectual study. So they're mashing together a bunch of stuff that's in the first line, and they're skipping over that problematic line or that difficult line, the Buddha Dharma cannot be known by a person. Now, the reason I say that I like the Tanahashi version better in this line is because it says Buppo wa hito ni shirubeki ni arazu. So Buppo is Buddha Dharma, Buddhist Dharma. Wa is, it functions a bit like the word is in English. So, I'm not going to give you a Japanese lesson, so just take it, take it like that. Hito ni shirubeki. Hito is person or people. That's why the discrepancy between the Tanahashi and the Nishijima Cross version. Nishijima Cross translates it as people, Tanahashi translates it as person. Hito could be person or people, and it depends on the context, but in this case the context is ambiguous, so we don't know people or person, and I'm going to tell you why I prefer people. So hito no shirubeki. Shirubeki is can be known, or ought to be known, and ni arazu means it negates what just came before, so it cannot be known. So Buppo, the Buddha Dharma, cannot be known by a person. That's what I think it means, or that's how I would translate it. And I understand why Nishijima Cross made it people instead of a person, but I think saying a person makes it a little bit more personal. It kind of hits a little bit harder, so that's why I like it better that way. The other version that I read you, the Hubert Neerman version, is a mistranslation. I'm sorry, Hubert. All apologies to you, but that's not what it says. It doesn't say it is something that ordinary people cannot recognize, because it just says hito. It doesn't say ordinary hito. It just says hito. He is conflating the first two lines, because the second line says that it cannot be known by a bompu. Bompu is an ordinary person, or more literally, an ordinary man. But man in this case stands for human, not gender specific. But he's conflating that, thinking that Dogen is saying the same thing twice in different words. I don't think Dogen is saying the same thing twice in different words. I think he's making two slightly different points. But I want to talk about this idea of the Buddha Dharma cannot be known by a person, because that sounds a little bleak. It sounds a little bit like what my teacher Nishijima Roshi said in answer to the question, can we know our own enlightenment? And he said, you cannot know your own enlightenment. But it's basically the same meaning. Now, when I read that, kind of flashed back, well, not maybe the first time I read it, but one of the times I read it, I kind of flashed back to one of my favorite books, Buddha is the Center of Gravity, Teisho by Joshu Sasaki Roshi at Lama Foundation. Now, I know Joshu Sasaki is a problematic person these days, and I'm not trying to uphold everything that the man did in his entire life by saying that one of his books is one of my favorite books, but he came out with a really good book in spite of everything else about him that might not be quite as good as this book. How about we say it like that? So he is talking here about the koan Hyakujo's Fox. And in the koan Hyakujo's Fox, there's an old man. We don't need to go through the whole koan, but I have talked about it in a video called The Famous Fox Koan, which you can go look up here if you want to hear the whole koan. But there's a scene in which an old man is talking to Hyakujo Osho, Master Hyakujo, and the old man says, who is this person standing before me? And the old man says, I am not a person. That's the usual translation. And in this translation, he says, I am not a human being. Same difference. It's okay. And here is what Joshu Sasaki says about this. He says, if you can penetrate this answer, I am not a human being, then you can be a Zen master. If you can realize perfectly I am not a human being, then I will affirm you as a Zen master right now. When you are listening to me, are you a man or a woman? You are neither man nor woman. If you are listening to this Roshi here as a man or a woman, then you cannot understand the meaning of what I'm talking about. Same goes for you listening to me. If you are listening to me as a woman thinking he is a short man, less than 5 feet, with a small nose, what if I have him as a husband? Then you are not listening to me. You are listening to the talk of the day after tomorrow. And then the people laugh, and it's noted here. Men are listening to me thinking, how big a navel does he have? Of course he doesn't mean navel, but he's being polite. Listening like that is like putting eye lotion in your butthole. He doesn't actually say butthole. He actually says the word that I'm not going to say here. That's why I tell you that your thoughts about koan are just dreams. Don't put lotion in the wrong place. When you are listening to me, you are neither man nor woman. That is right. So he's saying something rather profound here. So when Dogen says, we're going back to Dogen instead of Sasaki Roshi, Buppo wa hito no shirubeki ni arazu, a Buddha Dharma cannot be known by a person. He's calling into question the very notion of personhood. So you cannot know the Buddha Dharma as a subject apprehending an object. You don't learn it the way you learn, the rotation time of Jupiter. I don't know. Who knows the rotation time of Jupiter? It's probably pretty slow. I don't know how fast Jupiter rotates. But you know facts and things. How many strings a bass guitar should have, which is 4, never 5. 5-string basses are... Why do you need 4 extra strings when you've already got 3 extra strings? That's what I say about 5-string basses. But you know these facts, like I am here knowing this fact which is over there. That is not how the Buddha Dharma is known. The Buddha Dharma is known when you drop the entire concept of personhood entirely. And the Buddhist concept of personhood is really complicated, so I brought some visual aids to show you. I bought this years ago, or actually maybe this was, no, I bought this. I bought this at the last bookstore. I was thinking it was given to me. Anyway, Indian Buddhist Theories of Persons. This book is so dense and difficult, I have never actually read it. I leaf through it here and there. But it's stuff about Vasubandhu. Vasubandhu is how we say it in Japanese, or how they say it in Japanese. Maybe I'm a we when it comes to Japanese. I don't know anymore. But Vasubandhu's ideas of selfhood, very complicated. And there's a book Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, and this is the original edition, called Transformation at the Base. If I remember what it was called, it's been republished with a different title, and if I can remember that, maybe I'll put it as an insert. It's now called Understanding Our Mind. Now back to me. But the version I have is called Transformation at the Base. Those get into Buddhist ideas of personhood, and it gets really complicated because it is wrapped up with the idea of anatman, a non-self. So there is no self, there is no personhood, there isn't this solid object you can call a person who goes places and does things and is this and is that and has a race and has a religion and has a gender identity, all this other stuff that we put together and say, okay, when we put together all of that, that's person. And, well, it's okay to make a catch-all term so that you don't have to say a whole bunch of things every time you talk about a person. So a Buddhist doesn't actually sit there and go, I'm talking about the skandhas and the dhatus and the ayatanas and the combination. These are all Buddhist technical terms, and the combination of that. They'll just say a person when they want to just talk about the bag that all this stuff fits into. But what they want you to notice is that it is a bag that all this stuff fits into, and the bag itself is just a kind of an imaginary border you draw around a bunch of things. And those things may or may not exist independently, arguably. I mean, nothing exists independently. That's the Buddhist way of talking. But they may exist as things. You could say those concepts are real, whatever. But this putting it all together as a person, that's where we cause ourselves trouble, because we say, okay, all this stuff is a fixed entity that moves through time and does things and is this and hates that and loves this and votes for him and doesn't vote for her and loves her and doesn't love him and feels it, blah blah blah, all the things. That's a kind of falsehood. So what Dogen is trying to say, what I believe he's trying to say in this line, is that the Buddha Dharma cannot be known by that. That is not something that can know the Buddha Dharma. He doesn't mean, by saying the Buddha Dharma cannot be known by a person, that the Buddha Dharma is unknowable. It's just unknowable by a person. So long as you're approaching things in that mindset that I am a person who is this and that and the other thing and whatever you got going and all of that, then you're not going to understand the Buddha Dharma at all. And it's really difficult to drop this view because it's reinforced by everything, by every comment, every talk, every bit of conversation you've had, every book you read, anything. It all reinforces this idea of personhood. Even Buddhist books will often reinforce it inadvertently because they're forced to speak of things in terms of people, because you're not going to be understandable unless you do that. But know that this term person is a shorthand for a collection of things that function as a unit for a time and then at some time stop functioning together as a unit, but maybe they don't completely vanish at the moment that they stop functioning as a unit. Okay, Ziggy just got a sock. I don't know what he's going to do with that sock. Anyway, Ziggy's not a person either, but Ziggy's a dog. But even doghood is questionable. So that is what I wanted to talk about. And in this essay, Yui Butsu Yobutsu, Buddhas Alone Together with Buddhas, he doesn't. The essay itself is not exactly about that, but that is the first line in the essay, so it is an important line. And he does come back to it, and he says funny things like, when the supreme state of Bodhi is a person, we call it a Buddha. Sorry, I'm looking at Japanese. I wrote it down in Japanese and I forgot to write it down in English. And then he says, when Buddha is in the supreme state of Bodhi, we call it the supreme state of Bodhi. So Bodhi is enlightenment. And Dogen here is putting the state of enlightenment as a more solid and more reliable category than that of person. So the state of enlightenment is the thing we pay attention to, and not the personhood. So that gets really weird. And I got into a little bit of that in the, podcast that I just recorded yesterday. But I haven't gone that deeply into it. But I did go into it a lot more than I just did now. So listen to the podcast when I put it up on Friday, and you'll hear what I had to say about that. But this is an interesting idea, and I just wanted to call your attention to it and let you play with it as you like. So enjoy it. Anyway, that's what I got to say about Buddha Dharma not being able to be known by a person. Anyway, if you want to donate to my personhood, you can send a donation to the URL. Well, you don't send it to the URL. You go to the URL you're seeing here on your screen, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my main ways of making a living these days, and I thank you for your support. But as always, this is offered for free, so you don't gotta pay if you don't want to pay. Just pay if you want, and I thank you, those of you who do, because that really, really helps me out. I really thank you for that. So we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. Hey, Ziggy, are you a person? Are you a person? What you looking at, Ziggy? See you later.